Battlefield 4 released a little over 11 years ago, and for me, it was the ushering of the modern FPS genre. As why Battlefield 4 was so massive. I'm playing some Battlefield 4 in the background right here, so you all can see it. Granted, they don't like me very much because the only thing that's really left is custom servers, and I keep getting kicked from them, so you're going to see it change a couple of times, but bear with me. Battlefield 4 released back in 2013 to some mixed reviews. And realistically, it was one of the first extremely hyped up Battlefield titles that was globally excitable. Battlefield 4 was the first time that EA really tried to push their budget and the amount of eyes on Battlefield. It was slated to be a Call of Duty killer. Anybody who's been around the industry long enough to know is that anytime something comes around to kill Call of Duty, they're essentially not going to kill themselves off. Now, Battlefield survived that, but it launched to some very terrible performance. And it didn't matter what console you were on or on PC, you generally were waiting to try to take down the big skyscraper, and it would stutter your game out, half of them would crash, and everybody else would kind of freeze and point until it was over, and eventually enough, you know, Battlefield got it and fixed it, and everything was fine, but without, of course, doing immense amount of damage to the title before doing so. And then they spent roughly the next 6 to 8 months trying to make the game function. Does that sound familiar? It should. That has been the basic approach of every FPS title ever since. Now, of course, there are older titles that came out that worked terribly, that got fixed, and there were newer titles that came out that worked perfectly and never really had a bunch of issues. And I started thinking back as I've been playing a bunch of Call of Duty up until recently, where I just gave up on it because it's just too much, this repetitive cycle. And I started trying to think back to when the first time I really remember a game that I was super excited for coming out and then just absolutely playing very terribly and then turning around to end up being one of the better titles in the series. Battlefield 4 is one of the golden age of Battlefield titles, and it really introduced the massiveness of what Levolution was to be called and what we expect out of a Battlefield title. And a lot of these mechanics continued forward even into the Battlefield 1. And of course, with the current market as it is, Call of Duty absolutely tanking, especially on its Warzone side, which of course is what I'm known for. And there not being many other titles to attempt to combat against Call of Duty, like even Ubisoft's most recent title, X-Defiant, came out. Its entire premise was to fight back FPS shooter against what would be considered a juggernaut from Call of Duty. It ended up failing as well, and we are now stuck again with only Call of Duty and then third-party developers. I've been playing Delta Force on the channel, if you've been seeing it, or Marvel Rivals. Fortnite, I've played a variety of things, but one of the things that we really don't have that is anything a direct competition against Call of Duty is a modern FPS title that is military focused and just overall a AAA title. Now, at this point, it's been long enough, we should be starting to get information for another Battlefield. And here's my moment where I'd like to kind of go over the things that really makes Battlefield stand out, and hopefully look forward to the next ones when they're coming. We don't know. We've had a whole lot of conversations about will they, won't they, especially after 2042 and the massive displeasure that it came out to. The operators were something that was touted in an attempt to kind of take over the class systems. Even though they were still essentially classes, the characters and their gadgets became so much for what the modern Battlefield formula was. It just didn't feel like a Battlefield anymore. And that was one of my biggest complaints for 2042 when it came out. Besides, of course, you know, poor performance and the character classes. I would have to say that even though it's not my favorite Battlefield, Battlefield 1 is probably the most Battlefield we've had in a long time. I did a lot of time in Battlefield 1. I wasn't really as much of a fan of the gun mechanics. And honestly, after going back and playing a little bit of Battlefield 4 here, I just remembered why I enjoyed Battlefield 4's gunplay so much. It has actual recoil on the guns, and even though the time to kill is really fast, it still feels very rewarding, even without any of the like feedback systems that we've grown so used to in FPS titles now. Kind of like that thud, 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 thud you hit where you hear when you get an actual hit. The guns just feel nice, they feel punchy, and I mean, I'm running the FAMAS there behind us, where I'm just having a really good time on a modern shooter, which is something that I feel like we're kind of missing, because the game itself feels very, very smooth, which is something that we're running into a lot lately, where we're running into a lot of performance issues and a lot of gameplay issues. I know that probably a large portion of that comes from the fact that I'm playing on modern technology on a 13-year-old game, but it does feel really nice to have a game that is running as smooth as it is, and the guns feel as smooth as they do. They still feel punchy, yet still feel responsive. It's really nice, and I kind of miss that feel inside of my FPS title. On the bright side, we do have confirmation that Vince Zampella is the one running the Battlefield franchise now, which is the one who made the Titanfall series, and its gameplay is still touted as one of the most enjoyable or the highest skill capping versions of an FPS title in a long time. It is oftentimes touted as the diamond in the rough that people didn't play, especially once you start getting into Titanfall 2. If you like FPS titles and story games, I really recommend checking that one out. But Vince Zampella is one of the guys who also started a lot of the modern FPS titles from Call of Duty side of things, was part of Respawn Entertainment, which was a basically off-jet of what used to be Infinity Ward. Some of the developers left, they went and started up Respawn. They made Titanfall originally just for Xbox, and then Titanfall 2 that of course evolved on into the other ones. But he is a juggernaut inside of the business, and one of those people that has always produced really grade A titles. So Vince, if you happen to see this, thank you for your work, and I'm hoping for the best out of the next Battlefield title. We are, of course, in a modern gaming society, a place of gaming where we need stuff to be free. Most of the paid-for titles when it comes to online competitive games tend to fall off relatively quickly. So here is my hope list for the next Battlefield title. And of course, I want to know your hope list too, so if you have something that you would love to see or you would hate to see in the next Battlefield title, leave it down below. I would love to see where we're at. Maybe we're on the same pace, or maybe it's somewhere completely different and you can convince me, because why not? I'm a human, we all have our own opinions. So first off, I need a very solid modern FPS title. It's already been confirmed that they're trying to return to their roots like a Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4 style shooter. So a modern FPS shooter that is going to fill that 64 player, 32 versus 32 smooth FPS gameplay. I would love to see them introduce 60Hz servers, something that was already available inside of Battlefield 3. They actually made it up to 120Hz servers if you were able to rent your server from the server browser rather than actually having to use one of the EA-sponsored ones. So seeing a 60Hz server in today's moderns would be amazing, because one of the things that actually kills Call of Duty for me is the terrible server hit rate. And of course, having a smoother hit rate on a faster server means better gameplay. The next thing I would love to see is something where the guns are customizable, but not so much so as maybe Call of Duty has gone into. I don't think we really need 175 attachments, but a few attachments for every slot to give your gun a little bit of a personal feel while still being customizable, I think is a wonderful start. Right now we're going so far into customization that we're forgetting game balance and overall gameplay fun, and I think that that is something that could go a really long way to separate Call of Duty from Battlefield, and Battlefield to have itself a good time. The next thing is, I think that there always will be a desire for a competitive mode. Battlefield attempted to make a competitive mode multiple times, and most, of course, frequently inside of Battlefield 1, where they tried to create the Incursions game mode, which was a kind of tight-knit 5v5 style gameplay. It might have been 6v6. Basically, the point is there was a couple of squads versus a couple of squads on a smaller version, and there was an attempt to try to make it a competitive thing. It was a lot of fun, and I think it had a lot of potential, but of course it came really late in the dev cycle and didn't really have a chance to go to fruition. So I would love to see a large mode and a small mode. That way you can accompany both play styles and still be able to have a good amount of players to go between them. And then of course, because every major title needs this right now, I would love to see a massive free-to-play element. Whether that is a Battlefield VR, or a Battlefield open world sandbox military kind of thing, similar to like an Armor Reforger, or even something as an extraction shooter style gameplay. I don't know how that would work. It probably wouldn't if they tried to keep everything simple, but Battle Royale still function as one of the highest, entry points into a lot of titles, and whether or not it's a free-to-play add-on or if it's the whole game is free-to-play itself, Battle Royales, as much as people may love and or hate them, are an introduction into a series where a lot of people would have never gave them a chance. Looking at something like Fortnite's Battle Royale versus Fortnite's Save the World, I'm sorry, but a lot of people don't even know Save the World ever existed. But Fortnite Battle Royale is one of the largest things to exist in the world. Same thing can go for Call of Duty. Call of Duty's Warzone is probably a massive part of their player base's first Call of Duty now. Now, of course, if you would have said that 6 years ago, obviously it didn't exist, but it would have been one of those things that would have been laughed at. But the Battle Royale function has brought in a lot of players into the thing. And if you've never played Battlefield 5's Firestorm, it was one of the best and most just atmospheric Battle Royales I've ever played in my life. And it was unfortunately ruined by bad TTK and bad planning, but before the TTK got changed inside of it, it was one of the most fun Battle Royales I've ever played. And I know that Battlefield has the gunplay and the size and the familiarity in their own engine to make something that could be exceptional inside of the Battle Royale stance or in the extraction shooter stance. I do, of course, see them a lot closer to the Battle Royale than I do extraction shooters, but options are options, right? Now, of course, again, I want to hear your list for what you would love to see out of the next Battlefield title, and do you think we're getting one this year, next year, or never? Obviously, I would love to just see more competition, because more games that are more competition means everybody has to work a little bit harder, and hopefully everybody gets a better project and a better product, and hopefully a lot more attention in the way that their communities get treated. Right now, we're in a situation that we are in because there is no competition inside of these spaces. So we need somebody to come out and add some competition so that we can all enjoy our games a little bit more.